Okay, so the United States government, seemingly in protest, has decided not to send any American diplomats to attend the Winter Olympics that's being taken place in Beijing. This is apparently in response to the human rights abuses of the Chinese government. Take a look at what the press secretary for Joe Biden has to say about it, and then I'm going to give my own opinion.
The Biden administration will not send any diplomatic or official representation to the Beijing 2022 Winter Olympics and Paralympic Games, given the PRC's ongoing genocide and crimes against humanity in Xinjiang and other human rights abuses.
Press Secretary Jen Psaki said the diplomatic boycott sends a clear message, but would not prevent American athletes from attending, which she said would penalize athletes who have prepared for years.
The athletes on Team USA have our full support. We will be behind them 100% as we cheer them on from home.
President Joe Biden said last month he was considering a boycott amid criticism of China's human rights record, including what Washington says is genocide against minority Muslims in its western region of Xinjiang. Earlier on Monday, China's foreign ministry called any boycotts by politicians grandstanding.
没有人会在意。
No one cares whether they come or not, and it has no influence on Beijing's success in hosting the Winter Olympics.
任何的影响。
China's embassy in Washington did not respond immediately to a request for comment.
All right, that was interesting. So just to give you a better understanding of what's going on here, I'm just going to read probably just a paragraph or two of this situation from a Washington Post article. So the United States will not send President Biden or any U.S. government official to the Beijing Winter Olympics in February to protest China's human rights abuses, the White House announced Monday in a pointed snub to a country seeking to use the games to enhance its global standing. Though largely symbolic, the diplomatic boycott does not affect the ability of American athletes to participate in the games. It will be seen as a major affront by Washington's greatest military and economic competitor as China seeks to distract from its increasingly repressive politics at home and aggression abroad. This is absolutely amazing. And the reason I say it's amazing is because the United States government is wagging their finger at China and telling them to cool it, bro, on the human rights abuses, cool it, bro, on your domestic abuses to your own people. You can't do that. We're going to protest you. Let's talk about what the United States government has done in recent times. I won't even go back too far, but let's just talk about it in recent times. So we're going to berate, we being the United States government, a foreign government for their quote-unquote atrocities and human rights abuses. What they're specifically referring to is what they call a genocide of the Uyghur Muslim population in Xinjiang, I believe. Now, look, I'm not too hip on the situation of the Uyghur Muslims. The most that I know, it's obvious that they're not being treated well. I don't want to focus on that. I don't feel the need to focus on that. What I want to focus on here is the U.S.'s outright hypocrisy in this gravitas that's leading them to feel like they can say this to a different country. So the U.S. just got done waging an occupation, a 2 decades long occupation in Afghanistan that essentially consisted of bombing the shit out of these people, exterminating their population, and inducing vast amounts of terror in this region of the world. The war in Afghanistan, or the occupation of Afghanistan, recently ended in a withdrawal of American troops. The world at large didn't see it as a withdrawal. They saw it as a loss for America, which it was. And after that, you know what America's response is? Because, of course, as we know, the Taliban took over and they are now running the government in Afghanistan. Previously, it was a government propped up by the West, specifically America. America's response to that? Freezing Afghanistan's assets and money and inducing these basically economic warfare on the country by damning them to starvation. So this is a New York Times article that I want to read to you, just a quick excerpt from, and I just want to show to you what's happening in Afghanistan. So nearly 4 months since the Taliban seized power, Afghanistan is on the brink of a mass starvation that aid groups say threatens to kill 1 million children. 1 million children this winter. A toll that would dwarf the total number of Afghan civilians estimated to have been killed as a direct result of the war over the past 20 years. While Afghanistan has suffered from malnutrition for decades, the country's hunger crisis has drastically worsened in recent months. This winter, an estimated 22.8 million people, more than half of the population, are expected to face potentially life-threatening levels of food insecurity, according to an analysis by the United Nations, World Food Program, and Food and Agriculture Organization. Of those, 8.7 million people are nearing famine. Of those, 8.7 million people are nearing famine, the worst stage of a food crisis. So this is the result of devastating economic sanctions that the United States is imposing on Afghanistan. Since the Taliban seized power, as this article points out, practically overnight, billions of dollars in foreign aid that propped up the previous Western-backed government vanished, and U.S. sanctions on the Taliban isolated the country from the global financial system, paralyzing Afghan banks and impeding relief work by humanitarian organizations. And so across Afghanistan, laborers, doctors, teachers have gone months without steady incomes. The price of food and other basic goods have soared beyond the reach of many families. Children are anemic, emaciated. I mean, they're on hospital beds in intensive care. Some mothers can't even bring them to the hospital because they have no money. This is absolutely insane what's happening right now in Afghanistan. And where are the human rights defenders there? Where are the people like Mr. Enes Kanter, the turned American exceptionalist guy, that has so much to say about China? And okay, rightfully so, China does bad things just like many other governments do. But what about what the U.S. government is doing? Why aren't we criticizing our human rights violations? And that's not the only one. We're literally freezing their money so they can't take care of their population because we're pissed off that our government got put out of power. The government that we propped up in Afghanistan. We offensively invaded a country that didn't attack us, that being Iraq. The UN told us not to. We said, screw you, invaded them anyway. Killed hundreds of thousands of people, decimated the area. Pretty much the same situation that happened in Afghanistan, and we're still in Iraq. There was a recent drone strike that killed babies that they were trying. Remember the retaliation strike for the Kabul suicide bombing, in which they killed an American human rights worker as well as children. That's a human rights violation. Why isn't that being brought up? Should the Chinese and other governments be protesting us? Are we really the ones that should be protesting somebody else for their atrocities against other populations? Really? Okay, you want to talk about domestic abuses? We violate our population's Fourth Amendment rights every day. NSA spying. Edward Snowden did us an amazing favor by showing us how the government spies on us and how they violate our Fourth Amendment rights. What about Guantanamo Bay, violating the rights of the detainees there from, cruel and unusual punishment, being tortured? We know the horrors, the stories of what happened in Guantanamo, and it's still open. What about bombing in Syria, Somalia? Unauthorized terror that the president himself has taken upon to induce in other areas of the world. Look, man, this is no bashing of the country that I live in just simply for no reason because I enjoy it. I'm just pointing out the hypocrisy in that we have no right to be wagging our finger and telling different countries to stop doing what they're doing and that they're violating human rights and protesting and grandstanding like we're just angels. That's absolutely ridiculous and preposterous, and it needs to be called out.